The next step in our Pestel analysis is the technology environment. As we're trying to understand the technological environment, we have to understand that technology is changing so fast in our world and that things are moving so quickly. We're going to have a hard time keeping up with it. And unfortunately, even though no one in this room is probably going to end up with a PhD in IT, if you don't have a PhD in IT, you still are required to understand your overall corporation's technology if you're ever going to be a successful manager. So one of the things you're going to have to spend a lot of your time doing as a manager is just constantly reading about the things that you're going to be trying to implement in your products, the kinds of technologies you're going to be used to manufacture products, the kinds of components that are going into your systems. They're all going to be an important part of trying to understand what your product is actually made up of and how your environment is going to impact your overall company. So the first thing you'll be looking at as you're trying to understand the technological environment is your own individual products. A lot of people will think, I'm, for instance, one of our groups back there is doing Nike. What kinds of technologies do you have in Nike? Yeah, okay, so you don't think it's particularly advanced, and yeah, okay, so maybe you've got watches and things that might be a little bit high tech. But what about your shoes? Are they high tech? Exactly. If you really look at the difference in what makes Nike Nike, a lot of it's going to be technological advances, materials that don't absorb moisture as well, shoes that have a softer cushioning to them, all sorts of technological advances that are very hard to come up with, and yet are going to have a real impact on your sales. And so you're going to have to make sure you're paying attention to. So one of the pieces of the technology environment you're going to have to be looking at constantly is your own individual products and all the technologies that go into them. But understanding your own individual products and all the technologies that go into them are really just a small piece of the picture. You've actually got a much bigger picture you're going to have to understand if you're going to be able to get your technologies functioning right and your overall company functioning. So, for instance, one of the things you're going to run into is you're trying to run a company that has even medium technology into products, the Nikes of the world. But for instance, we've got a group in here that's doing Boeing. Boeing has some of the most advanced technologies on the planet going into its airplanes. And unfortunately, it doesn't control the vast majority of them. Yes, there are several million parts that go into a Boeing aircraft, but what we have to understand is Boeing did not build most of those parts. Most of those parts are components that are coming from other companies. And those other companies are using technologies themselves. They might, for instance, decide, you know what, this copper wire is just too expensive. We're going to shift to an aluminum wire. And to them, that might make perfect sense. And they might be able to show it has the exact same traits for being able to move electricity through that wire. But what they're going to discover if they put it into a Boeing aircraft is that aluminum is going to absorb a lot more of the radio spectrum out in the outer upper reaches that the Boeing aircraft are flying through, and that radiation might have substantial effects on how that wire performs and the signals that are being sent to the aircraft. The last thing you really want is being on an aircraft that suddenly has messages that are getting to its electronics that you don't want it to get. So it's not just a matter of understanding the technologies in your products, it's a matter of understanding the technologies and all the components of your products. And that gets to be a lot more difficult and a lot more challenging. If you start looking at things like aircraft and cars and even just things that you might consider simple, that phone you're carrying around in your pocket, those are not really simple things. They're hundreds of components, all of which are manufactured by somebody else that you have to understand the core technologies of and the core technology, the processes they use to build them, because as they change those things, they could actually end up changing your products and either give you a substantial advantage because they did something that works better than a competitor's might, or give you a substantial disadvantage, which is obviously not something you want. You have to make sure you're caught before it ends up inside of your own products. Once you've got your components down, you've got your own manufactured products done, the next thing is you've got to be looking at your manufacturing technologies. The manufacturing technologies you use will have a substantial impact. And again, we've got a group, for instance, doing Starbucks. You're going to be saying to yourself, yeah, but I don't have to worry about any of this. We're not manufacturing things. Well, actually, yes, you are. Manufacturing cups of coffee. And okay, the basic technology for manufacturing a cappuccino might be pretty much the same as it has been for several hundred years. Okay, 100 years is probably too long. 50 years maybe. For the last 50 years or so, we've been making cappuccinos pretty much the same. But at the same time, we have to understand that there's a lot of other technologies. How about the technologies in your cash registers? How about the technologies that are setting up your scheduling system for your employees? How about the technologies for all the various components that go in all the pieces of your company. A substantial change in any of those could be a substantial advantage to your company or substantial disadvantage. So for instance, if we use McDonald's in this class as an example quite often, we look at McDonald's. I mean, one of the things that really made them different was a cashier. I mean, basically they made it so that you didn't have to be able to know the prices of products anymore. You just had to be able to push the button of a cup and then push the button of a big cup or a small cup. And that was able to do the math for them and make things work. That significantly de-skilled the level of skills that was necessary for their employees to be able to do the job. They were able to make things work a whole lot better because they were able to be a lot cheaper because they were able to use a lot less skilled employees. So you got to understand all those manufacturing technologies as well, even when you're a company that's outsourcing all of your manufacturing. And yes, a lot of American companies outsource all of their manufacturing. As you are seeing that, what you're going to have to say to yourself is, okay, well, yes, I've got someone else building my product. But if you don't understand the manufacturing technologies that they're using, again, you might get substantial quality changes. You might get substantial costs increase or decreases based on the technologies that they've adopted. And those are things you're going to have to anticipate and make sure you're following the customers, make sure you understand well enough to be able to work with your customers and be able to make everything function right. Then it's not just a matter of, remember, we're doing external analysis. It's not just a matter of you being able to get the technologies and understand your own technologies. You have to understand all of your competitors' technologies as well, because you might choose one particular component, a competitor might choose something substantially different, and then one of the manufacturing processes for one of the components might either go really well or go really poorly. For instance, we all saw when cars and the microchip issue came up, suddenly cars couldn't get cheap microchips anymore. It really knocked several of the cars, automobile manufacturers who were using a lot of different microchips in their cars, put them in real trouble. So Ford was using 50, 60 different microchips in a car. Mercedes was routing all of its wires to one place and only had a couple of microchips. It was a much more advanced microchips they would get them to. Now, to be honest, Mercedes had a lot of trouble because of that. Wiring network can go wrong and things can go really bad with it. But it was a substantial advantage when that microchip shortage hit in the early 2020s. That's the sort of thing you need to be looking for is what I am doing different than my competitors. If it is, what kinds of things are going to change as the technology changes, and what kinds of advantages or disadvantages am I going to get? And so I need to really be watching for to be able to make things work well. Something else I'm going to have to be watching for really carefully is first mover advantage in my industry. Some industries that we talk about have a substantial first mover advantage. Other industries, actually the disadvantages stack up more. But ultimately, as we're trying to figure out first mover advantages and disadvantages, what we're really trying to figure out is what with my industry are going to be the technological changes that are happening. If I am out front of those technological changes, or okay, maybe a branding change or something along the line, might I be able to get that first mover advantage? And is that going to be substantial enough to pay for itself and pay for all the research and development and other costs that I ran into in trying to get that first mover advantage? Particularly as we're talking about the technological elements, those pieces can move very quickly, can move completely outside of your control. And those are things that you need to therefore be paying very careful attention to so that you can see them coming and be able to adapt to them before they actually get there. Remember, this is the external analysis, and the entire external analysis, the primary process is to make sure you understand your environment so well that when moves change, when moves happen and things change, you are prepared to be out front of them and make sure that you've got things that are going to be able to fix the problems that occur or maybe take advantage of the things that you didn't anticipate. Once you've figured out yourself and your competitors, now you start thinking, okay, now I've got a good scope of my technologies. Unfortunately, what you're going to discover is for every technology that you've chosen, that your competitors have chosen, there are lots of other options that you could have chosen. And unfortunately, you have to start watching all of them too, because if you're not watching all of them, then there might be a substantial change in something that you didn't see and didn't plan on. So for instance, back over the last 20 years, we've seen the world move from incandescent bulbs. Most of you are about the age. You probably grew up, at least for a portion of your life, having incandescent bulbs. And then we moved to fluorescent bulbs. And hopefully you all learned to hate fluorescent bulbs as much as pretty much everybody else did. The glow for them was wrong. And when we started moving them into office places, yes, they saved a little bit of energy, but they actually drove down productivity and actually cost a lot of companies a lot more money because all of the sound problems and the odd colors of the lights and such that caused people substantial challenges actually caused some productivity movements. Now, as we've shifted largely towards LED bulbs, again, the world has changed, and things as simple as, what's the color of the light in the room changes along with them, and we have to be able to anticipate those things, anticipate and measure how those things are going to have an effect on our productivity. And those are all things we have to know because, yes, that three-step process was dictated by us by government, but we had lots of other choices out there too. So we might have taken just that three-step process without ever knowing that halogen bulbs were substantially better than the fluorescent bulbs when they were around. They were a lot more expensive and had some other heat problems and such. But if we were to study those well, maybe if we've got an environment where we're trying to do something hot, we would have been better off with those sorts of things. So we have to make sure that we not only understand our own technologies and our competitors' technologies, but the other technologies we have as a choice. Particularly as we start getting into an age of AI and robotics, the world is just getting really, really complex, and being able to predict all this stuff in some ways gets easier because we can use the AI to help us figure it all out. But in other ways, it gets complex because everybody else has all the AIs too. And so we've got a lot more choices available to us. We've got a lot more better ideas for integrating them. And then obviously, as we've seen in this class, the coding problem goes away largely. And so we're able to do a lot of things that we weren't able to do without it. And that really has changed the overall approach to how companies are hitting their technologies. Last but not least is we're trying to understand our technologies. So we figured out what we're doing, we figured out what our competitors are doing, we figured out what our components are doing. We've pretty much figured out the technological environment. But what we haven't done at that point is still gotten ourselves into the base technologies that are underlying it. Where is our power coming from? Where is our sources of new products? Where are our sources of new ideas that are drastically different than what we've had before? So for instance, one of the base technologies that is a massive problem to our environment right now is batteries. We just got bad batteries. And because we've got bad batteries, we've got substantial compromises that we're making pretty much all of our products. I mean, we've got really great glasses now that could pretty much be giving us heads-up displays for the vast majority of what we do and be able to get us around a lot of our training problems, other problems, and such. Unfortunately, the thing that's really holding us back is batteries. Electric cars, what's holding us back, batteries. So many things that we need to make things work are batteries. And you can't expect, if you're sitting out there being an electric car company, that you're going to spend the small fortune it will take to significantly improve batteries. You kind of hope somebody else will do that. But for some of the kinds of base technologies you need, all the data centers we need for AI, for instance, we need a lot of energy to run those sorts of things. We need someone to have a major breakthrough in nuclear technologies. Those sorts of things are going to be worked on, and you hope as a company to kind of leave them to the side and let someone else work on them. But sometimes you're going to discover these things are so important to what it is you're trying to do, maybe we better try and help the process along. Sometimes you will bring them into your own company. Most of the time it's not worth that. It's too expensive. It's too broad a technology to be used just by you and for you to have to pay for it all. Most of the time, what you're going to discover is you're trying to create relationships with universities or other base research model to try and help figure those sorts of things out. But if you do that sort of thing, you will discover you can have some major breakthroughs. So for instance, we haven't quite seen it out yet, but we're going to start seeing the solid state batteries coming out, and it looks like Toyota is going to get them out first, and they might have a 700-mile electric car that is substantially lighter than the cars we've got right now, because a solid state battery will be a substantial improvement on the base technology. That will give them a huge competitive advantage. And if you didn't see that coming, you weren't helping it along, you might discover that you're substantially behind Toyota in your processes of trying to get that done. And that makes your life as a manager and your life as a business, running a business, a whole lot more difficult. So as you can see, technology is a really big piece of this. Because it's such a big piece, I want to take a step back at this point. We've been going on through Pestel for a whole hour now. Let's take a step back and try and actually practice some of the things we're going to be talking about. And ultimately, let's talk about it at the technology level, because it's something we can do. So our in-class exercise for today is basically what I'm going to ask you to do is go into your Gemini accounts. And what I want you to do is come up with a reasonably comprehensive technology list for what's affecting your industry, the industry of the project you're doing, of the company you're doing your project on. So if you're doing Boeing, obviously it's aviation. If you're doing Nike, it's sportswear. Basically, I want you to go in and do the Pestel, just like you did for your 5 forces model. I want you to go in and do your Pestel analysis. We'll just do the T today. It will give you the basic skill set. Which prompt are you going to use? Or what I want you to do is figure out what product technologies you've got, product component technologies you've got, industry manufacturing technologies you've got, top 3 competitors, major technical differences between you and them, the first mover advantages and disadvantages in your industry, the competing technologies to the major technologies used in your industries, and any needed changes to your base technologies. So I want you to use Gemini and try to help yourself figure these out. Which prompt are we going to use first and foremost to do to get this? Absolutely. It's going to be the outline extender. It's probably going to be the core one. What other one is going to be really important in the process? Not quite. What else is going to be really important? Absolutely, the fact check list. So make sure that you've run both of those prompts, run them through for your company, run them through for your industry. You're going to have to probably ask it a whole lot of backup questions, try and get yourself a good outline of all the technologies that are involved in your industry. You'll probably see it's a lot of pages long. That's okay. You'll be able to compress it all when you get to your final projects. Ultimately, what I just want you to do is see how to do this in the Pestel analysis. Make sure you're able to collect your information and move on with it. So get together with your groups, get going, and we will talk.